collection tubules or ducts make up these pyramids. And then you'll see that the flow of urine goes from this outer ring here, and it flows towards the center of the kidney. So all these structures we're listing are moving towards the center. All right, each individual branch is a minor calyx, and then collectively as a whole, that number 25 right here is going to be a major calyx. And we'll go over that in just a second also. So make sure you can identify the parts of this nephron up here. All right, so remember, millions of these are in your kidney. So this is where the urine is actually beginning to form. So the glomerulus, all right, this is going to be that ball of that capillary network that we were talking about. So remember, you have an arteriole going into and out of the glomerulus, all right? So you have the afferent arteriole going in, you have filtration happening here, and then you have the efferent arteriole leaving the glomerulus, all right? And as this leaves the glomerulus, you can see it turns into its own sort of capillary network that surrounds the nephron. So these are called peritubular capillaries. So as we go on, remember, we said that at the PCT you have reabsorption of nutrients, all right? So if you have things like amino acids and glucose that are filtered out of your blood here, your body might need that back. So what happens is right here along the proximal convoluted tubule, you have reabsorption of those nutrients back into the blood right here, which is that capillary network, all right? So this is the glomerulus here, and then the space that surrounds it, that's the Bowman's capsule. So anything that's filtered out of the glomerulus ends up in this Bowman's capsule space. All right, and then the filtrate just continues along the nephron. So it goes through the Bowman's capsule, and then this first segment right here is the proximal convoluted tubule. All right, so that's letter B. And then remember, that's where reabsorption of nutrients happens. And then you go into this loop right here, which is called the loop of Henle. This would be the descending loop, and then this portion right here is the ascending region or portion of the loop of Henle. All right, and then you have the distal convoluted tubule on this side, and then that empties into that collection duct. All right, and so remember, this right here, a bundle of those is what makes up the pyramids of the kidney. There are two different types of nephrons. I don't think they're actually in your PowerPoint, all right, but we do ask that you know these. So there's a cortical nephron and a juxtamedullary nephron. Likely you'll be asked mostly about the juxtamedullary nephron. And the main difference between those two is the juxtamedullary nephrons, they have a really long loop of Henle, and they sort of dip way down into the medulla of the kidney. And the cortical nephrons are much shorter, and they sort of stay mostly above the medulla. And so we learned that the main function of the loop of Henle here is for water reabsorption, all right? So one important thing about this, at least in a juxtamedullary nephron, again, one that has a really long loop, is that as the filtrate travels down the loop, all right, this whole descending portion of the loop is permeable to water, all right? And so the solutes are actually greater outside in the blood. So what direction do you think water wants to move?
Inside?
Right, so if the solute concentration is higher in the blood, the water wants to leave this descending loop and go back into the blood. So all along this descending loop, you have water being reabsorbed back into the blood here. Okay. And then one function of the, or factor of the ascending loop is that this is not permeable to water. All right, so when you go back up, you have a concentration gradient going back the other direction. So as you go further down, all right, the blood becomes more concentrated and water wants to keep moving out. When you go back up, it's the opposite. However, we just mentioned that the ascending loop here is not permeable to water. All right, so you lose a lot of water down here, and then do you think you can get it back going the other direction? No, so remember, this is not permeable to water. So what's happening is you're losing you're losing water back into the blood, and then you're not getting it back when you're going up the ascending loop. And so what do you think the reason of this is? What's the function of having sort of a porous ascending loop here, and then the ascending side where water can't get back in? Right, so essentially, this is your body's way of retaining water, all right? You'll see that typically in desert animals, all right? So animals that live in really dry environments, they have a lot of these really long loops of Henle in their nephrons, so they have a lot more juxtamedullary nephrons. And you can see that because the whole function of this is to conserve water, why it would be more important for things like desert animals. So when we're talking about juxtamedullary nephrons that have a really long loop like this, you know that the function of this is going to be conserving water. All right, so this just makes your urine more concentrated. And then again, remember when you get to the distal convoluted tubule, that's where you primarily have secretion. All right, so you also have reabsorption though, but again, remember the primary thing is going to be secretion. So if I ask you on the exam what the primary function of the DCT is, it's going to be secretion. However, we mentioned briefly that the buffer system was involved. All right, so if your blood is too acidic, your blood actually filters hydrogen ions into the distal convoluted tubule in exchange for bicarbonate. So by removing acid into the tubules from the blood, it's making your blood less acidic, and the blood is exchanging that for bicarbonate. So it's sort of reversing the pH of the blood by doing that. And the reason why hydrogen ions, if your blood is too acidic, is getting dumped into the DCT is because this is excreted as urine, all right? So essentially, if your blood's too acidic, your body is able to just excrete the acid or the acidity through your urine. So remember, the primary function of this is secretion, and then that empties into the collection tubules, which goes into the pyramids or makes up the pyramids of the kidney. So before we get to the kidney model, all right, remember these are all the terms that we just went through in that flowchart-like fashion. So some major terms or some sort of general terms are the cortex. The medulla should be on here, so make sure you write that in. The cortex is going to be the outer layer of the kidney, and the medulla is going to be sort of the inside or the innermost part.